My mother abandoned me at 6 months old. My dad raised me alone for 14 years, until he died. Now, her husband Marcus shows up at my apartment demanding to be my father and attend my wedding, but I confronted them in front of my entire family and slammed the door. They never saw it coming. I'm 27 years old. I'm engaged to the love of my life. And 3 weeks ago, I had to slam the door in the face of a man who's practically a stranger but insists I should call him Dad. The thing is, I already had a dad, a real dad, and he died 13 years ago, leaving me with a void that nobody, and when I say nobody, I mean nobody, has the right to try to fill. I guess I should start from the beginning so this makes sense. My mom, Stephanie, had me when she was young, like 21 or 22 years old, and she basically decided that being a mother wasn't her thing when I was about 6 months old. She just left. Just like that, without anything else. My dad, Thomas, told me this story when I was like 9 years old, and I remember he tried to make it sound less horrible than it was. But he told me that Stephanie left him a note saying she wasn't ready to be a mom and that he could do it better alone. Left, and that was that. My dad raised me alone from then on. He worked in construction, did long shifts, sometimes doubles, to make sure we had everything we needed. We weren't rich or anything. We lived in a small apartment in a lower middle-class complex, but I never lacked anything important. My dad learned to cook, learned to do braids when I decided to grow my hair long in 3rd grade, went to all my school plays and soccer games, and basically did the work of 2 parents without ever complaining. He was the best. Seriously, like the best father anyone could ask for. Stephanie, on the other hand, was legally obligated to visit me every other weekend according to the custody the court established. And you know how many times she actually showed up? Maybe 1 out of every 5 scheduled times, if I was lucky. There was always an excuse. She was sick, she had to work, her car broke down, whatever. My dad never talked bad about her in front of me, but I saw his face every time she canceled. That mix of anger and sadness, because he knew I was disappointed. The court also forced her to pay child support, something like $300 a month, which honestly wasn't much, but she didn't even pay that. She went to jail twice for not paying, and each time she got out and still didn't pay. My dad eventually stopped chasing the money because he said it wasn't worth the stress. When I was 6 years old, Stephanie met Marcus. They got married super fast, like in less than a year, and suddenly she could be a mother because she started having kids with him. They had 3 in total, all boys, and I would see their photos on Facebook. Yeah, I stalked them when I was a teenager. Don't judge me. And it was like watching a perfect happy family where I simply didn't exist. Marcus worked in some kind of office, something with computers, I think. And from what I could find out, he made good money. They had a nice house in the suburbs and all that. And there I was, her first child that she abandoned, watching how she could be a mom to other kids but never to me. What really made me hate Marcus, and when I say hate, I mean really hate, happened when I was 10 years old. My school organized a Father's Day event, one of those things where they invite the dads to come to school, do activities with their kids, eat lunch together, all very nice. My dad was super excited. He took the day off work and everything. But it turns out that Marcus decided to show up too, without warning, without asking anyone. He just arrived at my classroom as if he had every right to be there. I remember I was sitting at my desk waiting for my dad, and suddenly Marcus walked through the door with this giant smile and said, "Hey Peyton, I came for Father's Day." And I was like, "What? What are you doing here?" My teacher looked confused because she knew my dad was coming, and the other kids were staring at us. And I felt like I wanted to die of embarrassment. I told him my dad was already Braystock, coming, that I didn't need him to be there. But Marcus kept insisting with this attitude of like, "Well, I'm also your father, we should do this together." My dad arrived like 5 minutes later, and when he saw Marcus, the atmosphere got tense immediately. They knew each other, obviously from the whole custody situation and that, but nothing like this had ever happened. My dad was polite, because that's how he was. Always polite, even when he was furious, and he told Marcus that he appreciated the gesture, but this was his time with me. Marcus didn't leave. He said something like, "Peyton deserves to have multiple father figures in their life, and I want to be part of that." And I, at 10 years old, told them in front of my whole class and my teacher, "You're not my dad, he's my dad." And I pointed at Thomas. "Please leave." Marcus finally left, but the tension ruined the whole event for me. My dad tried to make the rest of the day normal, but I could see he was upset. Not at me, obviously, but at the whole situation. That night, after I went to bed, I heard him talking on the phone with Stephanie, and he was angrier than I had ever heard him. He was yelling things like, "You can't disappear for years and then send your husband to play dad, and Peyton has a father and it's me, not Marcus." I'll never forget that conversation. Honestly, after that, I kept my distance from Stephanie and Marcus as much as I could. By the time I was a teenager, I had basically stopped trying to have any kind of relationship with her. I didn't respond to her occasional text messages. I didn't go to visits, even when she scheduled them, and my dad backed me up completely. He said, I was old enough to decide whether or not I wanted to have contact with her. Marcus tried to send me messages on social media a couple of times. Things like, "I know things have been difficult, but I'd like to get to know you better." And I just ignored him or blocked him. And then the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my dates, life happened. When I was 14 years old, almost 15, my dad had a massive heart attack at work. He died before the ambulance arrived. It was a normal day. I was at school, and suddenly they called me to the principal's office, and there were my uncles, Ian and Evan, my dad's older brothers, with faces I'll never forget. They told me my dad had died, and I literally felt like my entire world was falling apart. I was 14 years old, and suddenly I was an orphan, basically, because the woman who gave birth to me didn't count as a mother in my mind. The funeral was horrible. Stephanie came, with Marcus and their 3 kids, and acted like the grieving widow or something, crying and hugging people as if she had lost the love of her life. But she left him. She chose not to be part of our lives, and seeing her there faking grief made me want to scream. Marcus approached me after the service, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I know this is a terrible time, but I want you to know that you have a place in our home if you need it. We're your family too." I removed his hand from my shoulder and told him, "No thanks. I'm going to live with my uncles." Ian and Evan had already offered to let me stay with them. They're a great couple who lived like half an hour from where I had grown up, no kids of their own, and they had been part of my life forever. My dad had updated his will a year before to name them my legal guardians if something happened to him, as if he somehow knew. He didn't mention Stephanie at all in the will, didn't even consider her as an option. Marcus looked like offended or surprised. I don't know. And Stephanie came over and said something like, "Peyton, we should talk about this. You're our child too." And I, at 14 years old, at my dad's funeral, told her, "No, I'm not. I never was to you." And I left with Ian and Evan. That was basically the last real conversation I had with her for years. Living with Ian and Evan was the best thing that could have happened to me at such a horrible time. They gave me space to process my grief, took me to therapy, made sure I kept going to school and maintaining my grades, supported me when I decided to go to college. They were and are more parents to me than Stephanie or Marcus ever tried to be. I call them my uncles, but honestly, they're my parents in everything but name. Over the years, Marcus tried several times to reconnect with me. He sent me messages on Facebook, then on Instagram, when I made an account there, long emails talking about how he'd like to have a relationship and that I should give him a chance. I blocked him every time. Stephanie also tried occasionally, but less than Marcus, maybe because she knew she had no basis to ask for anything. I moved forward with my life, graduated from high school, went to college, got a decent job in digital marketing, met Connor, my fiancé, and built a life that didn't include Stephanie or Marcus at all. Everything was fine. Seriously, I was happy and had left all that family drama behind. Until 3 weeks ago. One of my cousins on my dad's side, someone I still have contact with, turned 30 and organized a big party. He invited all the extended family, and unfortunately that included Stephanie because technically she's still family even though nobody really considers her that way. I didn't know she was going to be there. I swear if I had known I wouldn't have gone. But Connor convinced me to go because he said my cousin was important to me. We arrived at the party. It was at an event hall, kind of medium nice. There were like 100 people there. Music, food, everything normal. It was fine for a couple of hours. Talking with cousins and uncles I hadn't seen in a while, introducing them to Connor, enjoying myself. And then I saw Stephanie and Marcus on the other side of the hall. My stomach sank immediately. I tried to avoid them, obviously. I stayed on the opposite side of the place, but Marcus saw me and started walking towards me. He approached with Stephanie following him, and he had that fake smile I hate, and said, "Peyton, so good to see you. You've grown so much." And I was like, "Yeah, that's what happens in 13 years. It was awkward. Connor could feel the tension and squeezed my hand. I tried to be polite but cold, responding with monosyllables, hoping they'd get the hint. They didn't get it. Marcus asked about my life, my job, how I met Connor, acting like the interested father he never was. I answered him briefly and then tried to excuse myself, saying I needed to go to the bathroom or something. But then Marcus said something that made me explode. He said, "I heard you're getting married soon. Congratulations. I'd really like to talk to you about the possibility of me walking you down the aisle at your wedding. It would be an honor for me." I stood there, literally speechless for a second, because seriously he had just asked that? Connor saw my face and knew something bad was about to happen, and something bad happened. I told him, louder than I intended, but honestly, I didn't care. "Are you kidding? You want to walk me down the aisle? You, who showed up in my life like 20 years ago and has been consistently rejected since then. You, who's married to the woman who abandoned me as a baby and never looked back." People around started noticing something was happening. Marcus looked uncomfortable but tried to keep smiling and said, "I know things haven't been perfect, but I'm your stepfather, and I've tried to be there for you." And there I completely lost my patience. I told him, "No, you haven't been there for me. You know who was there for me? My dad, Thomas, the man who raised me alone because your wife decided being a mother was too hard. He was the one who taught me to ride a bike, who was at every school event, who worked overtime to give me a good life. And when he died, you know who was there for me? My uncles Ian and Evan. Not you, not her." Stephanie tried to intervene, saying something like, "Peyton, please, don't make a scene." But I was already in full I don't care about anything mode. I told her, "You have no right to tell me what to do. You haven't had it since you decided to abandon me. You went to jail twice for not paying child support, but somehow you were able to have 3 more kids and be a mother to them. How am I supposed to feel about that?" Marcus tried to defend her, saying that people make mistakes and that Stephanie has changed, and I just laughed, like a bitter and ugly laugh. I told him, "I don't care if she's changed. The damage is already done. And you, Marcus, you're not my father. You never have been, and you never will be. The only man who deserves that title is dead, and nobody, especially you, is going to take his place." The entire party was basically silent now. Everyone staring. My cousin, the birthday one, looked super uncomfortable, but also kind of proud of me, I think. Connor was supporting me completely, standing by my side, with his arm around me. I told Marcus and Stephanie, "Don't come to my wedding, don't contact me anymore, leave me alone once and for all." And Connor and I left. In the car on the way back, I was shaking, part anger and part the adrenaline crash from having exploded like that publicly. Connor was driving and let me vent, and then when we got home, he hugged me for like an hour while I processed everything. I felt bad about ruining my cousin's party, but I also felt, I don't know, liberated somehow. Like I had finally said everything I needed to say after years of keeping it in. I thought that would be the end, honestly. But 2 days later, Stephanie called me, and like an idiot, I answered because I didn't have her number saved and didn't recognize the number. She started yelling at me about how I had humiliated her in front of the whole family, how I was disrespectful and ungrateful, how she was my mother and deserved respect. I told her, "No. What you deserve is exactly what I gave you, the truth." And I hung up and blocked that number too. Last week, Marcus showed up at my apartment. I don't know how he got my address. Maybe he got it from some relative or something. But he knocked on my door on a Saturday morning. I opened, thinking it was a delivery or something, and there he was. He started with this prepared speech about how he understands I'm angry, but that we should work on our relationship, that he really wants to be part of my life, that Stephanie misses me and wants to fix things. I told him, "You didn't ask permission to come here, you weren't invited, and you're not welcome. Leave." He tried to stick his foot in the door, literally, like in the movies, and said he wasn't leaving until we talked properly. I told him if he didn't leave, I was going to call the police, and he accused me of being dramatic. Connor heard from inside and came to the door and told Marcus very calmly but firmly, "Peyton told you to leave. You need to go now." Marcus finally left, but not, without first saying that this wasn't over, that he wasn't going to give up on his child. I slammed the door in his face and finally, blocked every possible method of contact that he or Stephanie could have. Phone numbers, social media, email, everything. I sent a message to my extended family telling them not to share my contact information with them under any circumstances. Connor is being amazing through all of this, honestly. He asked me if I want to change the wedding date or change venues in case Marcus or Stephanie try to show up, but I refused to let them ruin my special day. Instead, we hired security for the wedding and gave them photos of Marcus and Stephanie with explicit instructions not to let them in under any circumstances. My uncles Ian and Evan are going to walk me down the aisle together because they're my real family, the ones who were there when I needed them most. And the truth is, I don't know if I did the right thing confronting them so publicly at that party. Sometimes I think maybe I was too harsh, that maybe I should have handled it privately or more calmly. But then I remember the 14 years I lived without a mother, the important moments where she simply wasn't there. My dad's funeral where Marcus tried to offer me a place in his house as if that compensated for everything. I remember that Father's Day at school, the canceled visits, the broken promises, the Facebook photos of their perfect family where I didn't exist. My therapist, because yes, I still go to therapy after all these years, says that establishing firm boundaries with toxic people isn't cruel. It's necessary to protect your own mental health. She says, I don't owe Stephanie anything, that the fact that she gave birth to me doesn't give her automatic right to be in my life, especially after abandoning me. And I definitely don't owe Marcus anything, who is literally just my absent mother's husband, not my father in any meaningful way. Connor and I are getting married, in 3 months. We've talked about starting a family eventually, and sometimes the idea scares me because what if I inherit something from Stephanie? What if I suddenly don't want to be a parent? But Connor reminds me that I had the best possible example in Thomas, and that the difference between Stephanie and me is that I really care about being a good person and a good parent someday. The fact that I worry so much about being a good parent is already proof that I'm not like her. Ian and Evan are incredibly proud of how I've developed. They tell me all the time. The other day we were planning wedding details and Evan said something like, "Your dad would be so proud of the man you've become," and I honestly cried. Because that's the only thing that really matters, that Thomas would be proud. Not Marcus, not Stephanie, but Thomas, the man who chose to be my father in every moment of every day until his heart literally stopped beating. I still have nightmares, sometimes about the day he died. I wake up with that feeling of emptiness, that absence of the most important person in my life. It's been 13 years, and I still miss him every day. But I also know that I lived 14 years with the best father anyone could ask for, and there are people who never have, even that. Stephanie gave me life biologically, sure, but Thomas gave me everything else. He gave me love, security, confidence, values, everything I am is because of him. So no, Marcus isn't going to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. Stephanie isn't going to be there crying proud mother tears. I'm not going to pretend we have some kind of functional family relationship just because they share my DNA. My family is Connor, Ian, Evan, my cousins on my dad's side who have always supported me, my close friends who are like brothers. That's my family, the family I chose, and that chose me. And if Marcus or Stephanie read this somehow, because I know some of my cousins are probably going to tell them about my explosion at the party, I want them to understand this clearly. I don't owe them anything. I don't owe them my time, my energy, my forgiveness, or a place in my life. They had 27 years to be part of my life in a meaningful way, and they chose not to. The consequences of those decisions are theirs, not mine. The wedding is going to be perfect, with or without their approval, with or without their presence. I'm going to be surrounded by people who really love me and who have been there for me through thick and thin. And when the time comes to walk down that aisle, I'm going to do it with Ian and Evan on each side, honoring the memory of Thomas, the only father who mattered. And that's more than enough for me.